What's up, YouTube? Long time no see. It's been a while, but welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to talk about and discuss this interview / conversation that the rapper Jeezy had with the actress Nia Long. I listened to the interview. I actually didn't watch it, but I listened to it. So I may have missed some things regarding like body language, but nevertheless, I did listen to the entire interview and I took notes and, I want to discuss some things that came up during the interview. And, I'm going to be fair, but I'm also going to say the things that need to be said. So with all that being said, let's get into this. First things first, I wonder why Jeezy chose Nia Long to have this conversation with, because it comes off more so as a conversation versus an interview, and I think that was strategic as well as Jeezy's choice in choosing Nia Long, because Nia Long is not really like a journalist or a talk show host or a podcast host. That isn't really her lane. And I think that was done intentionally because it makes it easier to not have to answer like the more difficult questions. And even in some points of the interview, Nia Long was answering questions for Jeezy. But my question about this, or another question about this rather, is why didn't Jeezy reach out to, say, Tila Tequila to have this interview? Or perhaps Brenda Song. Y'all know Brenda Song, she was like the token Asian girl from like the Disney Channel back in like the late 90s, early 2000s. So, why not Tila Tequila, Brenda Song, Maggie Q, Sujin Park from MTV, Julie Chen from The Talk, Connie Chung, who used to be on the same talk show that Al Roker is on, I think the Today Show. So yeah, why wasn't the conversation conducted with one of those women? One of those lovely ladies. Or perhaps even if you wanted to go black and, keep it all the way blackity black, all of a sudden now, well, perhaps Oprah Winfrey. But then again, Oprah might be a bit too highbrow for this. Oprah, like, I'm not going to be interviewing some trashy hip hop rapper, degenerate hip hop rapper. You know how Oprah is. But perhaps Gayle King, maybe. But Gayle, she would ask the tough questions, though. She would ask the tough questions. And, folks would be in their feelings about her asking the tough questions, even though those same folks were not in their feelings when she was asking Meg Thee Stallion about who she was sleeping with. And if she slept with Tory Lanez, that was all good in the hood and cool and wasn't considered to be an inappropriate or invasive question. But another story for another day. Back to this story. Or perhaps maybe they could have got the actress Monique to do the interview. Now, if you know, I would say Monique, she does have experience in like hosting and being a talk show host and things like that. But I do think that Monique, she probably would end up pretty much more or less providing the same result that Nia Long did with this interview. And, I'll offer Nia Long a little bit of grace and say that perhaps maybe she needed a paycheck. Maybe the sister just needed a paycheck. Maybe she wanted to get some waves popping. Get a little promo, a little publicity, perhaps. But let's get more into this interview though. So the interview pretty much starts off with like perhaps a reference to Jeezy being inappropriately touched in a sexual way by a female babysitter when he was a child. I'm not sure of the age difference and all that, but that did happen. So I think right out the gate, they are triggering the audience with this story to trigger like sympathy or empathy. So is he presenting this story to say that, this is perhaps why he acts the way that he acts in relationships, why he sees women the way that he sees them, or treats women the way that he treats them, or either it's just opposed to, or perhaps put the blame on someone else for some problem that Jeezy may be having. Because part of the thing is with this interview, I feel like they didn't really go into much details about certain situations, certain instances that were brought up during this interview. Or either if they did, it was edited. And the way that the interview came off, it did look like some things were edited out for some reason. And I'm not really extremely familiar with Jeezy, so I don't really know if he is some super sexual degenerate, and perhaps maybe he's trying to say this is the reason why I am that way. I mean, because something similar happened with Chris Brown, and something similar happened with R. Kelly. So perhaps there is some connection to that. Hopefully that is something that Jeezy has, addressed in therapy, that he has unpacked in therapy of some kind. Because Jeezy, he does have 3 baby mamas and 1 soon-to-be ex-wife. Perhaps there's some sort of a correlation there. Maybe. But then again, folks would just chop it up to him being a rapper. Or perhaps coming from the hood. Jeezy and Nia Long also talked about an incident that happened when Jeezy was young, when he was playing over a friend's house. There were neighbors, and there were 2 of them, 2 young boys, and he was over their house. And at one point or another, while he was there, a DV situation occurred where the husband pulled out a pow, you know what I'm saying, pulled out a pow and powed his wife 4 times. I believe she survived, thankfully, but of course that was a traumatic experience, which, in fairness, that would be a traumatic experience for anybody, let alone a child, to experience. But Jeezy knew at a young age to hide, and he hid under the bathroom sink and was eventually found once everything settled down. And he knew what to do because, I guess, in the environment that he has been raised in, it was common for things like that to happen, I think. In one way or another. Maybe not this immediate, though, but maybe just in general. So ultimately, because of his environment, things like this, pow and other forms of V were normalized. And they also spoke about, for a brief moment, Jeezy's brother. And he passed away when Jeezy was young. And then it was just him, his sister, who is younger than him, his mother and his father, but his parents wind up divorcing, so it ended up being just Jeezy, his mother, and his younger sister. And unfortunately, for one reason or another, Jeezy and his mother did not really have a good relationship. And he said that he does look like his father. And I think they put that out there to say, hey, this is perhaps the reason why that is, which I have heard that thrown around before, that sometimes moms will treat their sons bad because the sons look like the fathers that did them wrong or did them dirty. And his mother, based on the description, was described more so as like cold, verbally abusive, violent, and things wind up reaching a breaking point for Jeezy when his mother ended up pulling out a pow pow on him. And at this time, Jeezy was around 13 or 14 years old. And of course, Nia Long, she's raising two sons seemingly on her own, although the sons do have a father. So I don't know how that's going. They didn't really elaborate on that. But, during the interview, Nia Long got a little emotional. She was getting touched by the stories that Jeezy was telling her. And I'm sure that a lot of people were, especially a lot of black women. And let's be real, this interview / conversation was geared toward black women. That's part of the reason why Nia Long was chosen to conduct the interview / conversation with Jeezy. But my question to Jeezy at this moment is, like, does Jeezy have like an album coming out soon, or a book, or some other sort of a project that's coming out that he wants some support from? Or is this coming from a different place? Is this coming from, I got some projects that need some promo and some support, and you know how black women come through and support? Or is this like, I really do want to help the community? Or perhaps a combination of both. He want to help the community and push his projects. But back to the story, though. So Jeezy, once the whole pow pow threat came up with his mother, he wound up moving out of the house. And I think he wound up getting involved in some sort of a GED program. And he was able to get his general education diploma through some sort of a boot camp. The way that he described it, he mentioned it being like a boot camp. And it was able to provide some structure for him as well. Then during the boot camp story, he had mentioned being on the ship and having some sort of some thoughts of unaliving himself, or thankfully, he didn't go through with those thoughts, but I felt that was a bit interesting that they put that in there. And also he mentions that, once he had his son, or I guess his first child, who was his son, he stepped up his hustle. And he also said, at 46 years old, because Jeezy is 46 years old, he said that he has never experienced unconditional love. Whoa. And, Jeezy just got out of a marriage. Well, technically he's still married, but you know what I'm saying. He filed for divorce, so I'm guessing perhaps that has something to do with it. So I'm guessing the saltine fortune cookie did not provide Jeezy with unconditional love. The saltine fortune cookie, treated Jeezy like he was just some dark meat on the side. Now, ain't that a surprise? Ain't that a surprise, y'all? The saltine fortune cookie got on national TV saying she liked her dark meat on the side. And it's a surprise. I guess maybe he thought he was different, Right? You know how folks be thinking they different and the exception to the rule. Just like the saltine fortune cookie thought she was different and the exception to the rule. But now look at them. Now look at them. The saltine fortune cookie put dark meat as the main course. It did not work. And dark meat thought that the fortune cookie had a great future waiting for him. He thought that the saltine fortune cookie could provide him a great future. And no. And when they was talking about unconditional love and Jeezy never experiencing that, folks was in the comment section, no, why I'm crying? Why got me crying? No, I'm sitting here crying. Telling you, eating it up. And hey, if that really is the truth, then hey, that's something terrible. Definitely. But on the flip side, has he given anyone unconditional love? And also, he has children. Couldn't he get unconditional love from his children? But in order to do that, you do have to be an active father. And to be fair, I'm not sure whether Jeezy is an active or inactive father. I don't know because I'm not that familiar. But considering that he doesn't feel unconditional love from his kids, and also that he has like 3 baby mamas and a soon-to-be ex-wife, it doesn't strike me, that Jeezy is a family man, father of the year. I'm just not getting that vibe. If I'm wrong, someone please correct me in the comments section. Perhaps he's trying to make some strides to do better now, or maybe more recently, but back in the past, what was it like though? And from what I've heard, word on the street is he wind up getting into some sort of having some sort of a DV situation involving one of his baby mamas and his son. And also, Jeezy mentioned in the interview that he hasn't loved his son the best way that he could have, or something to that effect. And then he also mentioned in regards to his home life that he experienced more love in the streets. Yet, are you emotionally dumping your trauma on the streets? Or are you emotionally dumping your trauma on black women? Because Jeezy also mentioned in the interview, or the conversation, that they were having with each other, Jeezy mentioned to Nia Long that, black men need black women, especially when they're at their lowest, or something to that effect. Like when black men are at their lowest, that's when they need their sisters. That's when they need a strong black woman to come on through and ease the pain. Somebody to take the pain away. And that they need the black woman, right? Need the black woman. Because they can't have these conversations with their homeboys. No empathy. No, maternal, motherly feelings. And apparently they can't have these with their male family members either. So black women, it falls on you. Like pretty much just about everything else that goes wrong in this community, or everything that becomes a problem in this community, is like, okay, what black women gonna do about it? What you gonna do about that black woman? The black man been unemployed. And he can only pay the light bill now. What y'all gonna do about that? Y'all gotta help a brother out. And don't you get tired of everything falling on black women? And I kind of understand where black women come from when they just be like, hey, if this is what it is, then hey, I don't need a man. I'm strong and independent. I'm a strong black woman. Like, if this is what you got to work with, then what's the other alternative to that? And also there's the conversation about, black men, not all, but enough, associating black women, with the struggle. And even to put like a colorism slant, like darker skinned black women, because some people were saying like many or perhaps all of Jeezy's baby mamas are on the lighter side, maybe the more exotical side of things. You feel me? And he also ended up marrying, Saltine Fortune Cookie. And, I really feel like Jeezy may have married Jeannie Mai, aka the Saltine Fortune Cookie, because I think on some level he may have felt like he could get that happy, wholesome, familial environment with Jeannie. And perhaps partially the reason for that is perhaps that she didn't come from the same community that he came from. She didn't have the same upbringing that he had. She doesn't come from even like the same racial group as him. So perhaps he could get what he wanted in that. And at least on the surface, I can understand that if that's what he wants, because let's be real, some black women feel that way about non-black men, especially, once they have, really tried to make it work with black men, but constantly running into dead ends. But the thing is, Jeezy is probably associating black women with the struggle, most likely. But he's also coming to these same black women for empathy and sympathy and some support from, perhaps some projects that are coming up that he's going to be releasing soon. And, some folks brought up the fact that, hey, if this was a black woman who ended up in the same situation that Jeezy ended up in, there would not be any sympathy, empathy. We would not be having this sort of a conversation. We would be roasting her. Especially if she was linked with a non-black man who has gone on record saying that they quote unquote like their dark meat on the side. Just from that alone, she would have been roasted to oblivion just for getting with him in the first place, let alone marrying him, having a child with him, and having it not work out just, 1 or 2 years later. Black men nor black women would be rolling out the welcome mat for that black woman. So the question is, why does Jeezy get that grace in a situation like this? And also, I'm just going to give y'all a warning, a FYI. Do not be surprised if you see Jeannie Mai making her rounds and going to some black woman who has a podcast show or some black woman with a little bit of clout and pretty much doing the same thing that Jeezy is doing, but going to black women and emotionally dumping her trauma with Jeezy on to other black women. Because that happens too when it's like the non-black women get done dirty, get done wrong by black men, and they run to black women for empathy and sympathy too. And not all, but enough black women come through and be all, it's okay, it's all right, we all been done wrong by our black guys, so have. And then they end up trauma bonding, just like Jeezy and Nia Long are trauma bonding in this interview. And my question is, okay, trauma bonding is happening. All right, is happening. But what happens once the trauma bonding ends? Does it go back to business as usual? Or is there some sort of resolution of some sort that benefits both black women and black men? Personally, I think that it's just going to be back to business as usual. I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, just like with the whole situation with George Floyd happened, right? And all of a sudden, black women were the best thing ever, especially phenotypically unambiguous black women. The best thing ever, right? But after that died down, it went back to business as usual. And I know these aren't like exactly equivalents, but it's close enough, right? The spirit of it is there. Also in the interview, Jeezy mentioned that his mother ended up developing dementia, and he wanted to address some issues with her, before she moves on to the next phase of, her life, so to speak, go to a better place and all that. And he said that he was, trying to make amends and, address some issues. And it's like sometimes, it seems to work, his having conversations. And then other times it's like, oh, it's the dementia. It's like he's saying that his mama be jumping in and out of the dementia when it's convenient, And, hey, it seems like him and his mom have some sort of, issues and perhaps some trauma there, right? And that is terrible. That is terrible. Although I do feel like if this was his dad and he had this same relationship with his dad, it would be all good and cool. It'd just be chopped up to, oh, he's just teaching him how to be a man, right? And considering that Jeezy mom was a single mom, a divorced mom, perhaps that's where she was coming from with it. And also, since we're on the subject of Jeezy's dad, where is Jeezy's dad in all this? Because I didn't really hear him talking about his dad all that much during all this. So perhaps once his dad divorced, once his parents divorced, perhaps once that happened, his dad wasn't really too active in his life, maybe. But he also mentioned that he was like in some sort of a pow off, pow, when folks is just pow-powing each other, it's a pow off. You know what I'm saying? With his dad. So he thugging out there with his dad. But he didn't really go too hard on his dad for some reason. He went harder on his mom. And also, what kind of dad has he been to his kids? And it's like, yeah, we can have these conversations and we can, address people in situations that were wrong and things like that. But it's like, well, aren't we going to tell the whole story? Aren't we going to, keep it all the way 100? Service straight, no chaser. And his mother ended up passing away. And he had mentioned that he did not cry, when his mother passed away. Although he mentioned the last time he cried about anything was like when Tupac passed. And then he also went into a story about him and his inner child, and that was what triggered him to cry. But other than those two situations, seemingly nothing, according to him, right? He said he did forgive his mom, and he also asked his mom for forgiveness too. But he said basically he didn't really grieve his mother's death. Right? And unfortunately, it looks like they ended up departing, their relationship ended up ending because she passed away, and thus there was some unresolved resentment that maybe Jeezy could not get closure on, or is trying to find closure on, or something to that effect. And he also mentioned that he was accomplishing these milestones in his career and things like that, but he was not really being fulfilled. And he also mentioned that he was like touring, and he wound up tearing his vocal cords, and he had no insurance for the operation to repair his vocal cords, but he did have insurance on 3 of his Lamborghinis. And to be honest, I really don't think that is completely out of the ordinary. I'm pretty sure if you go through a lot of people's situations, they probably do take care of their car's health better than they take care of their own health. And then he had said at one point or another he had temporarily developed Bell's palsy, and his face ended up getting crooked. I think it ended up, going back to normal one way or another. Then he had also mentioned about having like traitorous friends, right? So they're traitorous, and you can't go to them with any sort of emotional problems. Wonderful. Why are these people in your life? And then, Jeezy said he has become, guarded, or has been guarded to protect himself, right? And Nia Long, she says she's from the hood too, so she recognizes Jeezy being guarded, because game recognized game. And then also Nia mentions that she has had a very public breakup, a rocky relationship for a long time. So she was in a rocky relationship for a long time, probably dysfunctional in some way, and she ended up getting cheated on. And where was Nia Long's safe space at when she was going through that? Where were black men at for Nia Long? I know there were some black women out there who were, showing support and things like that. No surprise there, but where were the black men at? And that brings up a question, which is, when black women are going through their situations and personal struggles, who do black women get to turn to? Who do black women have to turn to? As a collective, right? And also, if black men are turning to black women to emotionally dump their trauma on, it's like, well, the black woman also is dealing with her own trauma too. So now she got to deal with the trauma of the black man and her own trauma. And I'm speaking generally. Of course, not every black person is walking around, traumatized, but generally speaking. And Nia also mentioned that when she was in high school, she exclusively dated drug dealers, And before this, I wasn't really familiar with like Nia Long's background. So I'm like, okay, all right. So she's helping kind of piece together this situation too, as far as like why she was chosen. Maybe this is part of the reason why she was chosen, because of, her background, where she come from. And Nia also mentioned that she has like not the best relationship with her dad. Black fathers matter too. Black fathers matter too, y'all. And these stories that keeps coming up again and again and again. And I understand that black men, the brothers, have been traumatized by the system. I understand. But black women have also been traumatized by that same system. And also by black men. And shifty black women. But they still find the strength, the tenacity, and the love to show up. And maybe even show out in some cases. If black men ain't showing up for black women, for black kids, for other black men, then who are black men showing up for? why are they here other than for like procreation purposes? Other than that, why are they here? You know, asking for a friend. And I really think that black people in general kind of need to be aware of trauma bonding, right? Especially when it comes to black men and black women, but also even when it comes to like black men relationships and black women relationships, like, you know, black men's relationships with other black men and black women's relationships with other black women. Even in those relationships, you have to be aware of trauma bonding. Like, you can't really have a strong relationship if it's just built on trauma bonding. And I think folks get caught up in that, especially black women, and end up getting disappointed in the long run when essentially the trauma is over and the men have moved on. And sometimes the people have moved on. You know, once they cross the river, the saint is forgotten. But back to the story, though. So, Jeezy also mentioned that he was on tour and the tour was halted and he was put in jail based on something. I think something that wasn't true, or being accused of a crime or doing some sort of crime or something like that, right? I mean, how could you accuse Jeezy of, you know, being a criminal? I mean, he only raps about it in his music, right? You can't use that as evidence, you know, to arrest and convict, you know, Jeezy. That's preposterous. He has his freedom of speech. But seriously, though, but Jeezy was sort of crestfallen by this situation because he said that he did, you know, quote unquote, everything right in terms of, you know, getting rid of like bad people who shouldn't be around him, you know, straighten up and flying right, quote unquote, things like that, right? And he also mentioned that he received a call from Louis Farrakhan while he was in jail. And Louis Farrakhan told him that his message is changing. And because of that, he is in danger. Then Jeezy also mentioned that he had some issues with alcoholism, but he was able to stop. And at this point, I'm thinking, you know, when I'm listening to this, you know, outside of trauma, do Nia Long and Jeezy really have anything in common? And Jeezy also mentioned that he wanted to be a family man. I'm not sure quite where this occurred. I don't know if he said he always wanted to be a family man, because I think that he did. And I'm like, well, are you sure? Are you sure you always wanted to be a family man? And perhaps maybe maybe he has a different definition of what a family man is. Because perhaps he may just think having many children is a family man, when it's like, well, that's a part of it perhaps, but it's more to it than just having the kids. You also have to be present and helping take care of the kids and providing for the kids and protecting and you know, teaching them the right way and all that good stuff. And he also mentioned in the interview that, you know, quote unquote, real N-words don't cheat, right? Real ninjas don't cheat. So, you know, the sisters probably eating that one up too. They eating it up. I'm telling you, like this, like Thanksgiving dinner, like just ready to go in on this one. Getting full off these crumbs that Jeezy is throwing at black women. And he mentioned integrity as being like one of the reasons why real ninjas don't cheat. And he also mentioned that he is now walking in his purpose. And if that truly is a fact, then kudos to him. And he also mentioned that he was ready to grow, but his partner, who I'm assuming he's referring to Jeannie Mai at this point, the saltine fortune cookie. But, Jeannie was not. And what do you do in a situation like that? And it's like, well, I thought that, Jeannie was going to be submitting to her husband. Wasn't she going on the real hooping and hollering about being submissive? Like, oh, I wasn't submissive in my first marriage, but I'm sure going to be in my second marriage, y'all. And my sisters out there, let me give y'all some advice. So y'all can get like me. So y'all can get the ring. That's true. And then Jeezy also mentioned that he having some sort of a perhaps dream of encountering his inner child, and his inner child was sad and perhaps crying or perhaps teary-eyed, and he asking his inner child, what's the matter? And he says, the inner child responds that he's tired of everyone, around him being untrustworthy, tired of not being able to trust anybody. And that's another one, poking at the emotional triggers of the sisters. Oh, Jesus, you ain't gotta cry no more. No. Your black sisters here for you. Oh, yeah. All right. And when he was encountering his his inner child, he was emotional and crying too, and he had mentioned that he ended up having a great time with his inner child, and ended up playing games and watching TV, and his inner child saying that he loves him. And then Nia Long and Jeezy got on the subject of emotional men, right? And kind of like Jeezy, kind of like putting it out there that, some women don't want emotional men. And Nia Long saying that she agrees, but she doesn't understand why, though. So I'm assuming that she isn't one of those women, but she knows that, that is somewhat popular among women. So it looks like, Black women's emotion, it's good in some situations. It's like, oh yeah, and then other situations it's like, oh no, you need to keep your emotions under control, Black woman. You need to stop being so emotional. But when it's time to emotionally dump trauma on you, then it's like, oh, you need to be emotionally available for it. And I'm not directing this at Jeezy because I don't know if this is his mantra, but I'm just talking in general though. And then Jeezy also throws out the question, do women want leadership? And I'm assuming he's probably directing the bulk of this to Black women for obvious reasons. And Nia responds, it depends on the woman. And, it seems that Jeezy and Jeannie Mai went to therapy, but for one reason or another, it didn't work. And also, it's also like, what, 1 or 2 years into the marriage and you already have to go to therapy? And that's a bit strange because, according to Jeannie, everything's all good in the hood and, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood with all these Instagram photos and YouTube videos she be posting of her and her family. So that goes to show you that you really need to be taking this stuff that's posted on social media with a grain of salt. And in the words of Edgar Allan Poe, don't believe anything you hear and only believe half of what you see. But, a question I have is, why could not Dark Meat on the Side and the Saltine Fortune Cookie make their marriage work? Why? What was the holdup? Like, what was the problem? I know something had went around that Jeannie was, I guess, talking sideways and used to talking sideways to Freddie, her ex-husband, and she was trying to talk sideways to Jeezy, and Jeezy wasn't going for that. So maybe that was the part of it. I'm not sure where this submission is coming from, Jeannie, because she was. Where's the submission at? All right, but yeah, it looks like Jeannie Mai and Jeezy are headed to divorce court, and it looks like so far, I think Freddie and his wife, are going strong still. Seemingly, again, we don't really know what be going on, but seemingly, as far as I know, no divorce papers have been filed. And also, I kind of felt like Jeannie Mai was speaking too much too soon when it came to her relationship with Jeezy, the J's. Like, she would be on the reel talking about their relationship, then she would be doing like YouTube videos and Instagram photos of their relationship. And it kind of moved a bit quick too. And also, Jeannie Mai was very adamant that she did not want kids. But, of course, as you know, she ended up having a kid with Jeezy. And I wonder, was it Jeannie who brought up wanting to have kids, or was it Jeezy who brought up wanting to have kids? Because it's just because Jeannie Mai was so adamantly against it, at least with her previous husband, I wonder how did that come up? Because it would be extra salt on the wound if Jeannie Mai was still adamant that she did not want kids, but maybe Jeezy somehow convinced her to have kids. Then she has the kid, and then not too long after, he ends up filing divorce papers. If that is the situation, I can understand Jeannie Mai being really resentful about something like that. But again, just wondering. But, I think Jeannie Mai has her own trauma that she has been working through, because she has been a victim of, inappropriate touching, that sort of a thing too. And she has shared her story about that. So maybe perhaps Jeannie Mai wanted a family type of life, a traditional family situation. Maybe. But the thing is, Jeannie Mai thought that Jeezy, a black man who was raised in the hood, who came from a broken home, who has experienced trauma and has had a traumatic relationship with his mother, who was a thug in the streets, who had 3 baby mamas at the time they started dating, who has a documented history of DV with at least one of his baby mamas and his son. Jeannie thought that she was going to have a healthy, happy, functional marriage and family with him. Really, how? How? And again, Jeannie Mai also has her own issues that she needs to work through. But to be fair, though, I think that Jeezy probably just ran the same game on Jeannie that he ran on black women in this conversation with this interview with Nia Long. And Jeannie Mai was caught up in, her lust for dark meat, and also the fame and fortune, and even a little bit about wanting to be able to move on publicly so she can be, low-key throwing it in her ex-husband's face. Like, oh, you ain't the only one that can move on. You ain't the only one that can move on to bigger and better things. You ain't the only one who can upgrade. So that might have been a little bit a part of it too. But I'm going to bring this video to a close. I've gone on for long enough. But I want to thank you very much for watching this video. And please let me know what you think about all of this in the comments section below. Also, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you very much. And please let me know by posting the following phrase in the comment section below. No more struggle. No more struggle. Please post that phrase in the comment section below. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.